Hi there, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the Sony Alpha 1, their new flagship full-frame camera. Let's get started. Sony's new flagship camera, the Alpha 1, is a full-frame 50 megapixel sensor camera that was built for the shooter that wants to do it all. It has 5-axis in-body stabilization, has 759 focus points, and has a full-touch tilting LCD screen. The A1 has a continuous drive of 30 frames per second and shoots up to 8K video up to 30 frames. This camera also has 4K video available up to 120 frames, a microphone port, a headphone port, a LAN connection, a flash sync port, has Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to transfer images, and has the ability to charge the battery in camera for when you're on the go. Today we'll be going over the buttons, doors, and menus to help you find your way around this camera. This camera is incredibly impressive. I absolutely love this camera, and it's a flagship for a reason. There's so many cool features to this camera that just make it the all-around best camera for that person that just wants to do everything. Great video quality, fast speeds, not to mention this little window here at the front of the camera. What that is brand new to any Sony camera I've ever seen. This is going to give you a more accurate exposure and white balance when you have it on auto, because what this does is it's constantly looking for that change in color. So under fluorescent lights versus outside versus blue hour versus golden hour, that type of thing, and it's constantly correcting it for you. So yeah, on this camera, auto white balance, you should probably keep it there unless you're doing any sort of studio work. What else is on the front of this camera, of course, is our lens removal button here. So right now I don't have a lens on it, it's just the cap, but if I wanted to remove the lens, you just hold that button down, turn the lens, comes right off. Here you can see that we actually have shutters in front of the sensor instead of just broad sensor like we have seen in the past with other Sony cameras. So it means that you're going to be able to have just a little bit more protection when changing out those lenses and that sort of thing. So always remember, when you are in a location where you're changing your lens, always try and keep your camera face down and away from any sort of wind, so dust and dirt and debris do not find their way into where the sensor is. And then we have one of our adjustment knobs right here as well to adjust shutter speed, aperture, etc. Going to the side of the camera here, you can see that we do have our door for our cards. Now this camera is very similar to the A7S Mark III as to where it can take either 2 SD cards that are UHS 2, or you can use the CF Express A cards, which are going to be even faster and more archival. So you can use either or of those, so at least you have the option, which is really nice. And of course they are spring-loaded, so you push down for it to pop up. So this first door is actually going to have our LAN cable, the Ethernet cable, whatever attachment that is. So you can actually directly tether it to a computer and have direct transfer, which is fantastic. You have the flash sync cable here as well. Here we have, I believe that is going to be a speaker outplaying your audio, and I will show you where the mic is here in a moment. Under this one here is where you're going to find the micro USB port. This is going to be used for a few different things, mainly the remote control, the shutter release, if you wanted to use that. Considering that in this port here, we have our USB-C port, which is going to be for transferring. It's also going to be for charging in camera as well when you are on the go, which is always a really great feature in these cameras. You also have the HDMI port, which is a full-size HDMI, so really easy to find. And then in this door here, you have your microphone port and your headphone port as well. At the bottom of the camera here, you'll see that we have our battery door. This, of course, is going to house the FZ100 battery. Now, the grip that you can use with this camera, I believe, is the same that you would use for the A7S Mark III, if I'm not mistaken. So it is transferable, and you can extend that battery life, which is great. You also have your universal tripod mount, so you can mount this on a tripod or a gimbal or whatever you would like to do there. Going to the top of the camera here, you can see that it has a lot more laid out here than any Sony camera that we've ever seen. This definitely has a more, I wouldn't say complicated, this definitely has a lot more customizable options and features on the outside of the camera, which a lot of people have actually been asking for. Over here, starting here, if you hit this button here, you can actually turn this dial, and what that is going to get to is going to be your focusing modes. So what this is of course you have your AFS, which is autofocus single, AFC, autofocus continuous, and then of course you have your manual focus modes as well. AFS is going to be your autofocus single. This is going to be for a still static subject, someone that's posing, that type of thing, to where it focuses and locks on, versus AFC is going to continually focus as the subject moves. So sports, wildlife, any sort of action, that's what it's going to continually move its focus around as the subject moves, which is pretty great. And then of course you have your manual focus modes. You'll notice here that it does not have the autofocus auto feature that you see on other cameras. So you do have to kind of commit to one or the other instead of letting the camera decide, which is what I typically recommend anyway, and at least it's easily accessible. Then we have our drive dial, which to change that, you're going to push this button down and turn until you find the one that you would like. So the single square there is going to be our single shot, meaning if I click and hold the shutter button down, it's going to take one picture. The H plus with the multiple frames, that is our high plus burst mode. That's your 30 frames per second at 50 megapixels at that mode. The next one there with the regular H, that's going to be 20 megapixels. M is typically 15, and L is typically 5, I want to say, and those are customizable as well, the H, the M, and the L. Then you have your timer, and you also have your bracketing mode on there as well. On the sides of the camera here, you can see that we have our ports there for the built-in microphone. This camera, of course, does have the the mic port. You can use a better mic than what this offers. Now, they have put some pretty advanced mics in these, so it's supposed to be pretty fantastic. For me, I pretty much use my lav for everything. Then of course we have our hot shoe. This is going to be for putting mic onto, you could put a light on it, a flash, strobe, that type of thing right on top of the camera. The next part that we have here is going to be our mode dial. This mode dial is going to specifically be, for setting your settings. So the first one that we have there is going to be auto. Auto, of course, is going to let the camera decide everything and anything. You don't really have many customization options, but if Sony is a new camera for you, you are maybe purchasing this to get ahead and kind of future-proof yourself, auto is a great mode to start in while you're getting comfortable with this camera and the overlay of it. The next one that we have here is going to be the P mode. The P mode is going to be your program mode. This mode here is going to be your first step off of auto, where it kind of lets you start playing with shutter speed, aperture, ISO, your focusing modes, your metering modes, that type of thing. And of course, if you want to learn more about those or the modes P, A, and S, check out my Camera Basics playlist where I talk about more of that in detail. The A mode is going to be your aperture priority mode, where you primarily choose the aperture. So in my B-roll video, I was using the 24-70 2.8 G Master, which on this camera is actually usable. Something to keep in mind, just taking a break here, this camera is so powerful and the processor is so powerful, there are only specific lenses that will work on this camera. It's really important that you don't go cheap on a lens when you purchase this camera. You're already spending nearly $7 grand on this camera. Please don't go cheap on a lens, because then you're going to be really upset and you're going to go, what the heck, I have a broken camera. It's not focusing the way that I want or the way that they promised. You'll want to get one of the lenses listed below unless changes have been made since the recording of this video, but it's mostly going to be G Master lenses except for the 85 G Master. but those are going to be a guarantee to work because those were built for the focusing speeds and processing of this camera. So do keep that in mind. The S mode is going to be our shutter speed priority. This is for capturing motion, showing motion, that type of thing. Then of course we have our manual mode, which is you have the control. It does everything and anything you want it to do. The camera's only doing what you tell it to and what the settings you set it at. So I don't recommend jumping in this mode right away. A lot of people make this mistake. Now, you're going to be one of two people. You're going to dive into the hardest mode, you're going to force yourself to learn it, and you're going to be successful at it. Awesome, good for you. I am not that person. If you are like me and it takes you step by step to learn these things, and that's maybe why you're watching this video, do not jump right into manual mode. Take your time, really learn all these settings, and learn how to master your camera so you can enjoy it. The next mode here is the little film strip. This of course is going to be our movie mode. Now you don't need to be in this mode in order to record videos, but it does give you more video tailored options in the menu when you go there. Whether you want to record video on the video mode or any of the manual modes here, all you have to do is push the red button on the back, which we'll go over here in just a moment. Our next mode here is going to be the S and Q mode. This is our slow and quick mode for slow motion video or speeding up video. It's just a nice little shortcut there to be able to get to that fairly quickly without having to go in and change your frame rate and missing the moment, of course. Then of course we have 1, we have 2, and we have 3. These are going to be custom preset modes. So if you're working in a very specific setting where you have very specific settings for said setting, and you maybe are working in a studio set, maybe you have certain video settings you want to do, you can save them to these custom settings. So they're easily findable, they're easily set to, and if you say go for a walk, you're shooting in your P mode, and then you return to your setting that you have those specific settings for, all you have to do is switch back to that custom mode that you saved it to. And of course for the rest of the video and going through the menu walkthrough, I'm going to be in the P mode because that's going to help display all or at least most of the settings you'll see in your menu, versus if you were on the auto mode, it's going to severely limit what you see and what you can change. So if you're following along, make sure that you have it in your P mode when we go over the menu here. Then of course we have our on and off switch, along with our shutter button halfway down to focus, all the way down to take a picture. Now this camera does have a silent electronic shutter. It is dead silent. I could not tell if it took the picture. Personally, I like a little bit of sound to have that confirmation, but for a situation where maybe you're taking pictures of a golfing session or a very sensitive situation where you don't want it to be obvious that you're capturing pictures, like a wedding, a silent moment, this silent mode, no one's going to be able to tell that you're taking pictures, which is fantastic. Then we have our custom modes here. The C2 button out of the box is going to control your subject focus. So that is human eyes. This is animal eyes, so that could capture anything from cats to bears to dogs, any of those, to bird autofocus. That's right, they have accomplished bird eye autofocus. Fantastic. So this just allows you to quickly scroll through each of them. Naturally, I used human quite a bit, but if you were, say, doing a portrait session, you found a bird up in a tree, and you're like, oh, let me give that a shot. You switch to bird eye autofocus, and there you go. C1 is going to be programmed to change your white balance. Again, with this camera, I almost say keep it on auto white balance so it uses that feature up in front. I found that it was extremely accurate, so I'm going to leave that up to you. If anything, I would use this for a studio setting where you're using artificial light, but that's pretty much it. Then we have our other adjustment knob here, opposite to this guy here, so either one of these are going to change shutter speed or aperture depending on the setting that you're in here. Then we have our exposure mode, so to change that, this does have a locking button, so rather than here where you have to hold and turn, this just has a lock portion where you can go +1, 2, 3 to make the scene brighter, -1, 2, 3 to make the scene darker, for those situations where you just need to go a little bit lighter, a little bit darker without compromising anything on your settings. Going to the back of the camera here, you can see that again we have a lot more buttons than usual. We have our C3 button, which is going to be defaulted to our shutter type. So you have auto, you have mechanical, and you have electronic. And like I said, the electronic on this camera is silent. There is no sound whatsoever when using the electronic shutter without it having the actual, like, created click mode. So if you're taking pictures of any sort of event where you need it to be quiet, electric is the way to go. I'm keeping it on auto for now. What's also nice about the electronic shutter is there's no blackout screen. When you take a picture here and it uses that, you see the screen black out, and then that's it. You see the screen black out and then it'll come back because it's using the mechanical shutter. Versus the electronic shutter, it's just basically doing a screenshot, if you will. Then of course we have our menu button, which we're going to go over last. We have our electronic viewfinder here. Again, very similar to the A7S III. You can go ahead and bump up the frames per second on this to 240 frames. So it's going to be nice, smooth, cinematic. You're going to see every move through that viewfinder, which is pretty amazing. And then we have our sensor here. So if you put your face over the viewfinder, it's going to trigger that on versus taking away. It turns the screen back on there. We have our red record button, which I had mentioned previously. You can record video on any mode, P, S, A, M, or the video mode. And all you have to do is push this once to start recording, push it again to stop recording. Pretty simple. Then we have our back button autofocus. So if you would rather hit this button rather than the shutter button halfway down, you can do that. It also has an auto exposure lock button, which I love. It's very easy to get to, easily hittable with the thumb to lock in the lighting that you want. So that's pretty great. Then of course these also double as a magnifying and reduction tool when it comes to viewing pictures with the playback button here. That way you can zoom in and really see the quality, see if someone's blinking, all that fun stuff, or zoom back out with this button. Then of course we have our joystick here, which is pretty great, and that's used for multiple things. We have our function button, which is going to be our quick menu, as always on these cameras. So when we hit our function button, right out of the box, it gives us a few things that we can change. Now, some of these, as you can see, are grayed out, like the drive mode, because hey, we have the drive dial available. Why do we need that? And also the mode dial here that's changeable. Now, these are grayed out, so they can't be changed currently, but you can change them to be a different setting to change. So these are all customizable, but seeing as how these are probably going to be grayed out most of the time, I would change those to be whatever you would like. Then we have the focus area. This is where the camera autofocuses versus how the camera autofocuses with the autofocus settings up here on the dial. When you click on that, you have wide, which is pretty much the whole screen. You're dealing with over 700 focus points. You have a general zone, usually left, right, or middle. You have a center fix. Mainly what you do is in the center. You have your spot focus, so it's very small, and then you have kind of your expandable spot. I stayed on wide because I really wanted to take advantage of the eye autofocus and tracking on this camera to really show what it could do. Then we have the exposure compensation, which again is changeable by this dial here. Now you'll notice that this isn't grayed out because, you know, it's not set in stone necessarily. You can change it from the back screen or you can change it here. You have your ISO, your image sensitivity to light. I like to have it on auto and actually set a limit to it, so between 100 and 6400. This camera can go up to insane amounts of numbers, 102,400. Now, you may never find yourself there. I don't encourage you to ever go that high, but if it's a make it or break it photo, you gotta do what you gotta do. Then, of course, we have our metering mode. That's kind of where it's taking its sample of light from. This auto exposure lock can really help with that, especially if we put that to a spot area there, where it's basically taking it from the center and then you lock in your exposure with this button by holding it down. Now, the reason you would want to do that is because your multi is going to kind of consider lighting from the whole area. You have your center, which is always going to kind of consider from the center. You have your spot, which is center, but you can kind of move it around. So I'm actually going to leave it on center and use this. You kind of have your entire screen average. So you do have quite a few options there. You just have to keep in mind that your camera's not seeing in color, it's seeing in black and white. And when it finds that nice middle shade of gray, it goes, that's the perfect lighting. So depending if you have it on something really bright, something really dark, it's going to change the brightness and darkness in that photo. So that's where that auto exposure lock can come in, and you can lock in the lighting where it's most important. Someone's face, a specific subject, that type of thing. We have the flash mode, if you indeed had a flash. Now this, of course, is one of the full frame cameras that don't have the pop-up flashes, so this is really going to be for if you have a flash attached to the top. You have your white balance options. Again, you can get to this with your C1, your custom 1 button, which is also changeable to be whatever you would like. You have your creative look. Now, what they did with this camera that's different from the other Sony cameras is they abbreviated these, which I'm not a huge fan of, because I know that ST is standard, and I know that like V I think is vivid, and naturally BW is black and white, but they don't define exactly what it is on the screen, which I kind of wish they would have done for those that aren't familiar with the filters. Then of course you have your stabilization, the 5-axis in body. Now, if you have this on a tripod and you're doing any sort of long exposure or anything like that, you want to make sure that this is turned off. And the reason you want to make sure that's turned off is because the whole reason of having stabilization is your body always has just a little bit of shake to it when you're holding your camera. It's trying to compensate for that. Now, the tripod is not going to have any shake because guess what? That's stabilizing it. So that can actually cause shake in your photos if you decide to leave that on, so keep that in mind. We have the face and eye subject, that's the human, the animal, the bird, also able to get there through the C2 button. And then of course we have your recording media settings. I have it on automatic to determine whether I'm using slot 1 or slot 2. You can choose whatever you want to do with that. And of course your universal escape button is pushing the shutter button halfway down to get right back into shooting mode. And that's if you get stuck in your menu or your quick menu, whatever it is, you just push your shutter button halfway down, gets right back into shooting mode. Pushing up on the setting dial here, very similar to these. If you push up on the DISP, that's going to be your display, so it just changes the way that you see the screen, different settings, more busy, less busy. I personally like this one here because it kind of gives you a look at your battery mode, what mode you're in, how many pictures you have left on your card, what your shutter speed is, what your f-stop is, what your exposure is, and so on. So even though this one's a little bit busy here, I do like this one better because it does allow you to see what your settings are, what your battery level's at, to turn your touchscreen on and off, how many pictures you have left, all of that fun stuff there. If you hit to the right, you're going to be able to get another shortcut to your ISO, just like you saw in your quick menu. If you push down, it looks like that one's not set to anything currently. If you push to the left, not set to anything, but I do believe you can program these as well as the middle button too. So very highly customizable. There's a lot of options that you can work with and so much that you can do. And last but certainly not least, we are going to go over the menu here. So this of course has the brand new menu system that Sony has to offer. Personally, a lot of people complained about the original Sony menu. They were like, it's so difficult, I hate it, it's hard to navigate, this one's so much better. My first impression of this is I hated it, but that's because I liked the old menu. I had a very unpopular opinion. That's just me. Going through this a little bit more, I do still find it slightly overwhelming. I can see how people enjoy it because it has a more specific layout, but you'll see what I mean here. So let's go over the first tab here. The first tab with the star is going to be your My Menu settings. What this is it allows you to take any settings in these tabs here and take the most important ones to you and save them to one single tab, one place where you always know where to find it versus having to dig through here for all of it. Now the good thing is because you have all these customizable buttons, the C4, the C1, the C2, these buttons here, you can program these to do whatever you want as well. So there should be very few times you ever have to actually go into the menu itself. But if you do, you can always condense it right into your My Menu settings by going to the right, My Menu setting, going to the right, and going Add Item. So it kind of breaks down into folders, which again, I find very stressful because look, you know, you go down to the second tab here, you have your shooting menu here, and it starts with page 1, image quality, and then look at all the image quality you can change. And page 2. So I felt like for me, it was overwhelming. I have ADHD, so maybe that's why. I don't know. That being said, it is not going to stop us from going through this menu and me talking about the most important points that you are going to want to know. Now, also keep in mind, I am not going to go through in huge detail every single setting in the menu. And the reason that is because it's not going to apply to a lot of people, at least the majority of people watching this video. Now, if there is something specific in the menu I don't go over with enough detail or you have questions on, please let me know in the comments below, and I will be sure to answer those very promptly because I love answering questions. So, starting with the shooting tab here, and starting in the image quality, we're going to go ahead and it gives us JPEG/HEIF settings. This may be new to you. This is something that I believe Canon started with I think it was their D4. What that is it's very similar to a JPEG file. It's somewhere in between a JPEG and a RAW. It is smaller than a RAW, but gives you almost as much detail, which is pretty mind-blowing. Now, I didn't get the chance to try this because I only have this camera for like a day. So I didn't get a chance to try out using those specific files, but it's supposed to be the future of photography. So in the future, you will see me compare JPEG to HEIF. I think that's how you say it. And you can choose whether or not you want to use that or the other one there. Then of course you have your image quality settings, whether you want JPEG, whether you want RAW, whether you want both. You have your aspect ratio. I like to shoot in 4:3. It's typically a more regular setting. Typically 4:3:3:2 are going to be the more common options. Then you have your file format for your video. So because I have not updated my graphics card yet, regrettably, I cannot test out the 4K, much less the 8K video of this camera. So I have to shoot in HD for now until I get something that will be able to support it. And currently, I don't have access to a computer that will do that at the moment, but hopefully in the future you will see some of those examples from these cameras. We have different movie settings. So you have like the frame rate that you want to record at, the bit rate that you want to record at. So I recorded in 10-bit at the 4:2:2 ratio with the 50 megapixels. The APS-C shooting mode, so if you wanted to make this into a crop sensor option with a full frame lens, it would actually still use all of the current focus points, just giving you a 1.5 times crop, which is kind of cool. The long exposure noise reduction, now personally I like to have this off because I like to have more control over that in Lightroom, but you can do that and have the camera do it. It just takes a little bit longer to process. You have high ISO noise reduction, you have your color space, which I would keep at sRGB just to keep it regular. A lot of printers are, programmed for that. You have lens compensation, which of course is going to be for like any shading or aberration, that type of thing. Then we have media. So this is where you can format your card. Now for me, it took me forever to find this setting because format has always been in the toolbox. It's never been in the shooting mode. So this really threw me for a curveball, Sony. Format is in the second page of the shooting menu. And you typically want to do this to your card anytime you've backed up your card to your computer or your iCloud space or whatever it is, to a hard drive, and you're ready to reuse it. So formatting your card is going to completely reset your card and delete everything on it permanently. That's data, that's visible files, all of that. If you just use the trash can down here and delete files, it deletes the visible file but not the data. So technically it's still recoverable. So do keep that in mind as well. It's important to format your cards because when you just delete them and you leave the data there to be overwritten over and over again, it can cause corruption. So either be the person that when you're done with a card, you put it away into a binder and you go and buy a new one, or if you're going to reuse your cards, make sure that you format them every now and then. We have the record media setting, the recover image database, display media info. So these you're not going to use very much. The next one here is our file settings. So if you want to create a new file or folder, select record folder. If you want to do like a specific folder for a certain day or a certain person, create new folder, copyright info, all that fun stuff. Then we have the shooting modes. So we have camera set memory, so that's the memory recall. We have the drive modes, which has to do with this dial right up here. You have your continuous shooting speeds, which you can choose for H, M, and L, like I was saying, your self timer, your bracketing settings, your interval shooting function, pixel shift, if you want to do that with this camera. Then we have the shutter/silent. So you have silent mode settings. Keep in mind, if you decide to turn that on, it will turn off other settings. So keep that in mind when you're doing that, because like it may not be able to trigger flash, that type of thing. Then again, you can choose your shutter type. You can also do that with the C3 button. Release without a lens, if you wanted to use something other than a Sony lens that maybe not be directly compatible. You have your release without a card. I like to disable that because I want to be sure that not only are the pictures going to the card that's in it, maybe it's programmed for another slot, I don't know, but I also want it to be able to tell me, hey, there's no card in here, you better put a card in, because I forget to put a card in my camera all the time. You have your anti-flicker settings, which has actually been improved in this camera in comparison to older models where you're seeing some banding going on. This has drastically improved, so you don't see so much of that flicker. Steady shot, again, the stabilization, also found in your quick menu. You turn it on and off. You can do like the focal length at the point that your stabilization kicks in. You have your zoom options if you were using like a digital zoom lens. You have grid line display if you need help with your composition, grid line type, live view display settings, your ISO options. We have your, oh, and by the way, we're in the second tab now. That's going to be our exposure and color. So again, you're not going to change these often. It's kind of going to be a one and done sort of thing, because your exposure compensation is this dial here or your quick menu. And then we have metering. Again, you change your metering through the quick menu as well. Your flash, so different flash options and customizations when you're using one. You have your white balance. Again, there's C1, and there's also going to be your quick menu as well. You have your dynamic range if you would like to turn that on or off. This has 15 stops of dynamic reach, so is pretty fantastic. You also have your creative look, the filter, standard, vivid color, black and white, all those fun ones. Picture profile if you want to make your own. You have zebra display. Here we have autofocus, manual focus. So now we're on the fourth tab here, which is going to mainly focus on focusing. So you have like autofocus illuminator, where it shines a light out to help it focus if there's a lack of detail or too dark. We have aperture drive and autofocus. We have autofocus with shutter if you want to push your shutter button halfway down, whoops, and exit. And focus if you want that on or off, or if you specifically want to use back button focus, which is more commonly used in Nikon, but you know, it's kind of nice that they made that available. You have your focus area, again, findable in the quick menu, focus area limit, your switch to vertical and horizontal autofocus area. I don't know if that's necessary. Your focus area color, if you were manually focusing with this camera, you can have it outlined in white to show it's really in focus. Autofocus area registration, if you want to register that. These are extremely smart cameras these days. It can register faces, autofocus areas, places, all of that fun stuff. You have area display during tracking, which I love to see. I love to see where it's tracking exactly, especially when it comes to the eyes. Autofocus continuous area display, want to see that as well. Circulating to focus point, I do have that on because I wanted to see exactly how great the focusing was on this camera, and I'll tell you, it blew me away just how quick this focuses. And not to mention, you can change the sensitivity of that as well. So face eye autofocus, if you wanted that on, if you want a human, animal, or bird, again, you can get to this by the C2 or the quick menu button. The subject select setting, right or left eye, if you want that on automatic. Face eye frame display, if you want to see the green box around the eye so you can follow that. I love that feature, so I love to have that on. Again, face memory, so it registers faces if you would like it to, and it kind of organizes that for you. It has like a, you know, face saving mode. You have auto magnification and manual focus. So if you have that on and you do try and manual focus, it's going to magnify that so you can make sure what you're shooting is actually in focus. We have like how much time you want it for, you know, how much you would like it to magnify. We have our peaking display. If things are too bright, you can have it outline itself in a certain color. You can do, so on the 5th tab here, you can see that this symbol matches our playback symbol. So this is our playback menu. You can select certain playback media, slot 1, slot 2, your view mode, if you want to enlarge, so with the magnifying glass. You have selection or memo, so you can protect, you can rate, you can put a voice memo to your pictures, you can delete pictures from here, or else you can just look through your photos and delete with a trash can. Delete by pressing twice. I would keep that off because sometimes I double hit my buttons on accident. But what's nice is if you go into the playback menu and you accidentally hit this, it highlights cancel first. Unless you don't want it to, I would leave it this way. That way, if you do accidentally push it, it does get canceled, not delete. Then you have edit, so you can crop, you can rotate, you can copy, you can switch JPEG to, you know, the other one there. For viewing, you can do continuous play. You can do a slideshow. Image index, display as a group if you want to do that rather than singles, display rotation, which I like to have on auto, focus frame display, so all these are for after you take the shot. Our second to last one here is going to be our network, so like our internet, our Bluetooth, our Wi-Fi connection, that type of thing. So you can do smartphone connection to connect to the Imaging Edge mobile app to transfer your pictures to a cellular device to share. You can do select on camera and send, so you can do that to a computer or a phone. You can connect while powered off, which is crazy, but it does kill the battery. So if you plan on using any of these to have it like automatically transfer over, to do the tethering, anything like that, I would recommend getting the battery grip. That way you can keep it charged as it goes, because that uses quite a bit of battery. You can do remote shoot setting through the application. You can do a PC remote function if you wanted to remote control it through the app on your computer. And then of course you have the Bluetooth remote control as well. And we have location link info if you want to use your phone's GPS to connect to the camera. You have your different like Wi-Fi frequency band, display Wi-Fi info, reset. So all of your Wi-Fi options. There's the LAN option there. Airplane mode. I have airplane mode on currently because I don't plan on using any of the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi for this camera anytime soon. And having that airplane mode on, at least with older models, I haven't confirmed it with this one yet, saved battery. So if that's the case, it doesn't hurt to have it on, that's for sure. You can edit the device name. So if I wanted to name this headers A1, I won't do that because it's not my A1 as much as I would love it to be. I could do that if I wanted to. You can import root certificate, reset network settings, and then we're down to the very last tab here. This is going to be our general setup options here. So you can change the language, you can change the area, date, and time settings. You can change, like you can reset your settings. So say you're playing with this camera and all of a sudden the camera's doing something funky, you have no idea what you changed. Safe bet is if you go into setting reset, everything should fix itself. If it doesn't, you might have a problem. At that point, contact who you purchased it from. Then we have our save and load settings. This is where you can change all of your custom keys, all the C4s, all the buttons here, the function quick menu. We have my dial settings, so it's kind of this here or these. We have lock operation, if you want to kind of lock it up. Touch operation. Now, this is the first time, by the way, that a Sony camera is fully touchscreen. Amazing. It's what everybody's kind of been asking for, other than the articulating screen, which I was surprised they actually didn't do with this model. But seeing as how it's more of a flagship, you're less likely to use the articulating screen. I get it, because you're more likely to be behind the camera, not in front of it. But anyway, it still has the tilting screen, which is nice. You have touch sensitivity if you wanted to change that. You have your touch panel or pad. You have like select finder monitor if you wanted that to be automatic, or if you wanted to specifically use one or the other. You can change the brightness. You can change the frames per second. If you want to do that. You can change the gamma on the viewing screens, which, you know, again, just highly customizable on this. But generally, you're probably not going to really change any of these ones. You have auto monitor off, if you would like it to turn off after a specific amount of time. Power save time after so long, so this is after 1 minute. If I'm not doing anything, it'll go into a power save mode. And you have like auto power off for temperature, which may kick in with that 8K video, considering that with other cameras that have tried and attempted to do the 8K video, they overheat after so much time. I don't have a report on this camera yet and how it does at 8K video for whatever amount of time, but I'm sure that you guys will hear about it. But just know that it's normal that after 20-25 minutes, it may have a temperature issue and may have to kick down into 4K. Then of course we have volume settings, audio signals, you have 4-channel audio monitoring, we have USB connection, what you want to do with that, the HDMI options, we have video light mode, which is interesting, along with the infrared remote control, because this has an infrared sensor built on the handle, so if you want to turn that on or off, rather than using a physical corded remote or a Bluetooth remote. We have anti-dust function, auto pixel mapping, and then of course your firmware version as well, to ensure that this is updated to the highest firmware possible to make sure that it's going to be usable with even more lenses than what's currently available, and they can upgrade functions on it to be even better than what they are right out of the box. Other than that, that sums up this camera. The Alpha 1 is mind-blowing. For me, there's a reason it's a nearly $7,000 camera. For good reason. Not only are you future-proofing yourself, this guy is going to last a long time. The features are going to last a long time. you're not going to want to upgrade this camera for a long time. So if you have any questions about this camera, if there's anything that I can help you with specifically, if there's another camera you would like me to test out and give you a walkthrough of, or if there are certain lenses you'd like to see with this camera and how they do, let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to add them to my to-do list. Until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.